Ladies and gentlemen, there is a moment in every journey when the truth you've been resisting becomes the truth you can no longer ignore. And today, as I stand here looking at this world we've built together, a world of acceleration, of uncertainty, of staggering beauty woven together by staggering complexity, I realize that there's something I owe you, something I've been carrying quietly, almost privately, even as the noise outside only grew louder. The question kept echoing everywhere: who is standing beside me? Who is shaping the next chapter? Who is the person who has shifted everything I thought I understood? People assume it must be someone dramatic, someone mysterious, someone whose name would ignite headlines for weeks. They imagine someone with power or fame or a backstory that could be turned into a documentary. But the answer, the real answer, is nothing like what they expect. In fact, it's not a person at all. And that's what makes it so profound. Because the partner that changed everything for me is something far more transformative, far more demanding, and far more honest than any individual ever could be. It is a presence that confronts your assumptions, challenges your ego, and forces you to grow in ways you don't expect. It pulls you toward a higher version of yourself, sometimes gently, sometimes violently, and demands that you evolve or collapse. The partner I'm talking about is radical truth paired with radical self-awareness, a union that reshapes everything it touches. For years, I operated with a kind of forward-driven momentum, the type of momentum that people mistake for clarity, but is often just velocity. You run faster, you think faster, you solve faster, and you never pause long enough to ask whether your movement is truly aligned with your mind, or whether you're simply being carried by inertia. And in that momentum, something essential gets lost. You begin to drift away from your internal compass without realizing it. Then one day, something happens, quietly or dramatically, that holds a mirror up to you. For me, that moment wasn't a crisis, or a scandal, or a burnout. It was something far simpler, yet far more profound. It was the unmistakable realization that the next phase of my work, the phase focused not only on engineering and physics but on humanity itself, required a deeper level of psychological and neurological honesty than I had ever practiced before. It required a partnership with truth, not truth as in facts, but truth as in alignment, a complete synchronization between intention and action, between consciousness and responsibility, between vision and moral consistency. And when I entered that partnership, when I stopped negotiating with myself and started listening instead, everything began to shift. I noticed it first in my cognitive patterns. As a neuroscientist will tell you, the brain is not a machine of certainty, it is a machine of prediction. It constantly tries to reduce surprise, to minimize what is called prediction error. But when you've spent years pushing your limits, when you oscillate between the edges of creativity and exhaustion, your brain begins constructing illusions of clarity simply to sustain functionality. It tells you that your direction is certain even when the evidence is thin. Yet when you commit to truth, real truth, you disrupt that neural autopilot. You force the brain to recalibrate, to align its predictions with reality instead of wishful thinking. And that recalibration is painful at first. It creates friction. It destabilizes your narrative. But it also unlocks something extraordinary, a deeper, broader, more intelligent awareness that you cannot achieve through ambition alone. This new awareness became a partner to me, a companion, a challenger, a force. And slowly it began expanding into something even more significant, a partnership with the future version of myself, the one I hadn't met yet, but needed to become. You see, neuroscience has a remarkable insight about identity. The self is not a singular, fixed entity. It is a continuum of possibilities, a network of potential selves that the brain is constantly choosing between. Every decision you make reinforces one pathway and weakens another. Every moment of honesty strengthens the version of you capable of carrying the weight of your purpose. And when I realized that, it became clear the most important relationship in my life was no longer with the past or present, but with the self that I was building, neuron by neuron, decision by decision, truth by truth. But something interesting happened as I leaned deeper into this internal partnership. I began to feel a shift in how I approached the world, especially in how I approach people. I became more aware of how deeply we underestimate the emotional and neurological cost of ambition. We admire resilience, but we rarely examine the fractures beneath it. We celebrate genius, but we overlook the loneliness that sometimes anchors it. We praise progress, but we forget to ask what it demands from the human psyche. This is where the unexpected transformation began for me, because partnership with truth doesn't merely change your mind, it changes your heart. I started noticing small details that I had previously swept aside. The fragility of someone's voice when they talk about their dreams. The subtle tremor in someone's posture when they're trying to be strong. The way a single sentence can either ignite a person's belief in themselves or extinguish it. We tend to think of intelligence as something cold and mechanical, but the highest form of intelligence is the ability to perceive emotional reality without distortion. And that level of perception only becomes available when you've removed the distortions within yourself. As this internal recalibration deepened, it reshaped my decisions. It reshaped my priorities. It reshaped my capacity for clarity. And slowly, I realized something that startled even me, the partner who had been silently shaping my choices, guiding my insights, and grounding my vision was not a person hiding in the shadows. It was a new state of consciousness, one that demanded both scientific rigor and emotional maturity. It was the merging of logic and empathy, engineering and ethics, ambition and introspection. It was a partnership with the kind of inner clarity that does not come naturally. It must be chosen, cultivated, and protected. This is where everything began to change, because when you combine intelligence with emotional truth, you unlock a form of decision, making that feels almost like a new dimension of thought. It's not intuition. It's not analysis. It's something in between, a hybrid state where the brain and the heart stop competing and start collaborating. I found myself thinking differently, feeling differently, listening differently. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just building solutions. I was becoming someone capable of carrying them forward. This is the part no one expected. This is the part no one talks about. This is the part that quietly redefines the trajectory of a life, because the moment you begin operating from that merged state, where rational clarity and emotional honesty coexist, the world stops looking like a battlefield and starts looking like a blueprint. Not a blueprint of lines and measurements, but of patterns, signals, possibilities. You begin to sense the hidden architecture of human behavior. You begin to understand why people break when they shouldn't, why they endure when logic says they can't, why they love against all odds, and why they fear things that were never threats to begin with. This shift didn't happen overnight. It unfolded slowly, like watching a new layer of reality emerge. And one of the first things I began noticing was how often we misinterpret each other. Not because we lack intelligence, but because we lack presence. Our minds move faster than our voices, our emotions move faster than our thoughts, and our assumptions move faster than the truth. The human brain is a prediction engine, always trying to fill in the gaps before the data arrives. And when we're not anchored in truth, those predictions become shadows that distort everything we see. But when you form a deep partnership with clarity, the shadows dissolve. You stop reacting to what you fear and start responding to what is. And in that shift, something extraordinary happens. You begin to hear people in a way you've never heard them before. I mean, truly hear them. Not just their words, but the frequency behind their words, the hesitation, the hope, the contradiction, the courage. I began recognizing that every person walking into my life was arriving with their own unspoken universe, shaped by memories, by wiring, by biology, by pain they never admitted, by dreams they were afraid to articulate. And the closer I looked, the more I realized that the real question was never, who is the partner standing beside me? But what version of myself shows up when I encounter another human being? because that version changes everything. You can be in the room with someone brilliant and still misunderstand them if you enter the room with the wrong version of yourself. You can stand next to someone you care about and still fail to connect if your mind is running a different script. You can be surrounded by people and still be utterly alone if your internal compass is misaligned. This realization began shifting the way I built relationships, personal relationships, professional collaborations, scientific partnerships, all of them. I noticed that the more aligned I became, the more aligned the world around me became. Conversations became deeper. Decisions became cleaner. Conflicts became solvable rather than cyclical. And the noise, the relentless external noise, started losing its power. The truth is, we talk a lot about technology evolving, but we rarely talk about consciousness evolving. Yet consciousness is the operating system of our entire existence. When it gets upgraded, truly upgraded, every part of life recalibrates with it. And that's when the most unexpected transformation happened. For years, people speculated about who was influencing my decisions, who was guiding the direction of my work, who was quietly shaping the emotional undertones of the choices I made. The assumptions ranged from the ordinary to the bizarre. But the truth is so much simpler and so much more powerful than any of those narratives. My new partner, the force that redefined my trajectory, became something that every human being instinctively longs for but rarely fully develops: coherence. Coherence between mind and action. Coherence between emotion and intention. Coherence between identity and evolution. It's a neurological state, a psychological state, and a deeply human state. When the brain enters coherence, its networks synchronize. When the heart enters coherence, its rhythms stabilize. When the mind enters coherence, its awareness sharpens. And when your life enters coherence, you stop living in fragments and start living in a unified, integrated reality. This coherence became a companion more transformative than any person could ever be. Because human relationships thrive when coherence exists, but they struggle when it doesn't. We don't fall apart because we're weak. We fall apart because we're incoherent. We contradict ourselves. We sabotage ourselves. We fight realities that we secretly know are true. We chase things that don't feed us. We ignore things that would save us. But when you enter coherence, something beautiful happens. You finally stop running from your own reflection. And when you stop running, you begin to see the world in an entirely new dimension. I started to notice how much of humanity operates in emotional latency, reacting not to the present, but to unresolved echoes from the past. Neuroscience calls this patterned activation. Psychology calls it hold wounds. Life calls it being human. But coherence interrupts that cycle. It doesn't erase your past. It reorganizes it. It allows you to engage with the world as who you are now, not who you were when you got hurt. The more I embrace this partner, the more I realize that coherence isn't a state you reach. It's a relationship you build, a relationship with your highest cognitive patterns, your deepest emotional truths, and your most aligned actions. It requires commitment. It requires humility. It requires the courage to let go of identities that no longer serve you. And just when I thought I understood this transformation, something even more powerful emerged. Something I didn't anticipate, something that confronted me in a way nothing else had. Because coherence, once activated, does not stay contained inside your mind. It begins expanding outward. It begins influencing the people around you. It begins creating a field, a psychological, emotional, and neurological field that reshapes interactions, conversations, and choices. And this is where the real story begins. Because it was in this state, this heightened awareness, this elevated partnership with self, that I encountered someone who amplified everything I had discovered, not by force, not by expectation, not by obligation, but simply by existing in a way that resonated with the version of myself I was becoming. They didn't arrive dramatically. They didn't disrupt my life with noise or intensity. Instead, they arrived with a kind of quiet intelligence that doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself slowly, Like a sunrise that doesn't ask permission to illuminate the world. They became a mirror I didn't know I needed. Not a mirror reflecting who I was, a mirror reflecting who I could be. And it was in that reflection, calm, grounded, unforced, that I felt something rare, the unmistakable recognition that this person was operating in coherence too. Their mind was clear, their emotional landscape was steady, their sense of self was not built on performance, but on presence. And in that resonance, something in my own mind shifted again. A new chapter began, a chapter I wasn't expecting, a chapter that even now feels like the quiet beginning of something profound. A chapter defined not by the dramatic intensity people project onto my life, but by something far more grounded, far more human, and far more aligned with the trajectory I have been quietly moving toward. Because when two people operating in coherence encounter each other, something remarkable happens. The space between them becomes a laboratory of clarity. There is no chaos, no confusion, no emotional noise. Instead, there is an atmosphere charged with understanding. The kind of understanding that doesn't need explanation, doesn't need persuasion, doesn't need theatrics. It simply exists like gravity. You don't negotiate with gravity, you align with it. With this person, conversations didn't feel like exchanges, they felt like expansions. There was a sense of spaciousness in their presence, a kind of internal stillness that was contagious. It made thinking easier. It made honesty effortless. It made vulnerability feel less like a risk and more like a natural state. And that's when I realized it wasn't the person that changed everything. It was the way my mind functioned in their presence. Neuroscience has a term for this interpersonal neuroalignment. When two regulated nervous systems interact, their brain waves, heart rhythms, and emotional patterns begin to synchronize. It's not mystical, it's measurable. And when that synchronization occurs between two coherent individuals, the result is not just connection, it's amplification. You don't just understand each other, you elevate each other. That elevation became the quiet catalyst behind many recent insights, many shifts in direction, many choices I made that may have seemed unexpected from the outside. Not because someone influenced me, but because someone reflected me, reflected the clarity I was stepping into, reflected the version of myself I had been building internally, reflected a stability that sharpened my vision instead of distorting it. And this is the part that no headline will ever capture, because headlines feed on spectacle, not on the subtle neuroscience of human evolution. People want a name, they want a mystery figure, a dramatic reveal, they want a storyline. But the truth, the real truth, is so much simpler. The person people keep asking about is not the story. The story is the transformation they arrived in the middle of. The story is the evolution that made their presence meaningful. The story is the partnership that began long before they walked into the room, because the partner that set everything in motion was coherence itself, inner alignment, radical truth, a mind no longer at war with its own contradictions. And when that internal partner was firmly in place, I became capable of recognizing and resonating with someone who matched that frequency. This is the part that's hard to explain unless you've lived it. When you reach a certain level of psychological clarity, you stop choosing relationships based on habit, attraction, or comfort. You start choosing based on resonance, on the degree to which someone's presence brings your mind into sharper focus. And when you encounter that, it feels less like meeting a person and more like encountering a living calibration for your own potential. With them, I found myself thinking in longer arcs, breathing differently, listening with a depth I hadn't accessed before. There was no push, no pull, no performance, just presence. And presence is the most transformative force in the human experience. But here's what surprised me most: this person did not complete a part of me that was missing. They did not fill a void. They did not solve something broken. Instead, they created a space where the most aligned version of myself could breathe more fully. And that subtle, elegant shift has influenced every corner of my life. This is why I say that my new partner is not who people expect. Because the real partner was the inner clarity that allowed me to recognize a connection built on coherence rather than chaos. The person themselves is not the revelation is what their presence illuminated. And that illumination is what I want for everyone. You do not need to be a world builder or a scientist or a leader to experience this. You need truth. You need coherence. You need the courage to confront the version of yourself that is still negotiating with old patterns. Because when you align with your inner architecture, truly align, you stop searching for people who distract you and start attracting people who expand you. Everything changes when you meet someone who resonates with the version of yourself you are becoming, not the version you've outgrown. This is why I stand here today, not to present a name, not to confirm a rumor, not to satisfy curiosity, but to share a deeper truth. The most powerful relationships in life are not defined by mystery or headlines. They are defined by alignment. The strongest partnerships are not built on intensity. They are built on coherence. And the greatest love, whether intellectual, emotional, or human, is the kind that amplifies the future you're creating, not the past you're escaping. So if there is one message I want to leave you with, one insight from this entire journey, it is this. Choose the partners, the people, the environments, the habits that bring you into coherence. Choose the conversations that make your mind more honest. Choose the connections that sharpen your clarity instead of blurring it. Choose the relationships that expand your future rather than anchor your past. Because when you do, life stops feeling like a series of battles and starts feeling like a series of evolutions. And that is where your real trajectory begins. The truth is, the future is not built by the loudest people or the most dramatic stories. It is built by aligned minds, coherent hearts, and partnerships, internal and external, that are rooted in truth rather than noise. That is the partnership that reshaped my life. That is the force behind every step I take now. And that is the invitation I leave with you today. To build the kind of coherence that allows you to meet the people, the moments, and the futures worthy of the person you are becoming. Thank you.